Welcome everyone to our third IEF lecture, February 2021. Our speaker today is Rafael Shayani, a doctor of engineering who specializes in photovoltaic and solar energy and is extremely focused on teaching undergraduates the right stuff to get them going with their careers. And today he's going to talk about teaching undergraduate students about climate change in their curriculums, which sadly is not necessarily always done. He's an electrical engineer by trade and works at the University of Brasilia. A little bit about IEF before I hand it over to Dr. Shayani. IEF is the International Environment Forum, a Baha'i-sponsored environmental organization. If you want to join us, not yet a member, I will put the link in the chat. We've got a monthly newsletter with news from around the world, a yearly conference, a class on climate change coming up in April, another class on sustainability every fall, and we're monthly webinars. We're always looking for interaction among our members and submissions to our newsletter and volunteers for the speaker series and participation and making friends and networking and all the good stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to Rafael Shayani.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thanks for the invitation and for the opportunity to be here to talk about climate change in the International Environment Forum seminars. I will share the presentation. Okay, I will talk about capacity building in undergraduate engineering students to deal with climate change. Why undergraduate engineering students? Because I am a professor and I teach everyday classes to undergraduate engineering students. So this is a way that I think everybody can do small things to help to make the betterment of the world. And this is how I try to make my professional life and my private life and my whole life in doing things that I believe. So I think if you think that climate change is important to talk to everybody, why don't you talk to the people who works with you? And as a professor, you can talk to hundreds and thousands of students. So I think it's a nice opportunity to talk with them about climate change. And I bring here my experience about it. Let's talk about energy. There is some information here about the energy sector's current growth model. Humanity requires increasing amounts of energy day after day. And current, this energy still comes essentially from fossil fuels. The growth of renewable energy sources is still very low. It's getting bigger day after day, but it's still low. And there is an increase in the emission of CO2 by the energy sector. This is a chart from the International Energy Agency showing total energy supply for the world in the last years. We can see that there is this increased amount of energy. The fossil fuels are about 8% of the energy matrix of the world, a lot of coal. You can see coal, it's getting bigger, a lot of natural gas and a lot of oil. And the renewable energy sources, it's really small. This yellow curve is wind and solar. They are growing, but it's not sufficient yet. This is a presentation, this is a graph about the global greenhouse gas emissions. It's from Emission Gap Report from United Nations. And there is still increasing amounts of emissions. And the fossil CO2 is the bigger one. So we will focus on this. This is another chart from International Energy Agency, CO2 emissions by the energy sector. It's the same chart we have just seen, but here we can see coal, oil, and natural gas is still increasing their amount of CO2 emissions. If we change this chart, not to source, but to sectors, we can see electricity, heat, industry, and transport are big sectors that emits a lot of CO2. And these are engineering related issues. I think engineering can work with electricity. It's electrical engineering, heat producers, mechanical engineering, industry. You have chemical engineering, for example, mechanical engineering, transport. You have automobile engineers. So engineering can have an important role to help deal with this situation. We can see that these characteristics can be summarized like this: a most technical vision of energy resources, a concern about energy security. Every country, they need to have plenty of energy because they want energy security. Planning to support the trend of energy growth. It's a fragmented vision when the generation of energy is disconnected from its use and its impacts on society and environment, which are treated as externalities. This fragmented vision that will be discussed in this lecture now. And energy systems designed primarily by engineers. So a drastic modification is necessary. This is another chart from emission gap report. We can see that we are here and the current policy scenarios is still growing the emissions, but we should go this way. We should go to 1.5 degrees range, that it's an abrupt, a drastic modification in the emissions, but it's not the current policy scenario, and it's not the NDC scenarios too. There is a big gap report, gap emissions, and we need to do something to put it on track again. So a drastic modification is necessary. So major problems require major transformations. This is the IPCC report that says the following: the stabilization of the greenhouse gas concentrations at low levels require a fundamental transformation of the energy supply system. So you need a fundamental transformation. These UN reports, The Future is Now, they have a call to action. International and national entities and stakeholders must collaborate to reshape the global energy system. And even the International Energy Agency, they say, achieving net zero emissions require a radical transformation in the way we supply, transform, and use energy. So we need a major transformation on the energy system. And it's all related to engineering. So education is an important part of the solution. This is the goal number 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we can see the 4.7 by 2030, ensure that our learners acquire the knowledge and the skills needed to promote sustainable development, including sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity. So this is an important goal. How, as educators, what can we do to help to achieve this goal? So education is important. So let's go to a specific point of engineering education is an important part of the solution. Building capacity, we need to build capacity in individuals, communities, and institutions to contribute effectively to this process. As individuals, everyone can modify our lifestyles and have to be in harmony with the nature. But engineers, they probably will join institutions that will help to reshape the energy system. So if you build capacity on them when they are on college and in the university, they will be better prepared. They will have the capacity to join the institutions and then to make radical transformations there. In my class, I asked for the students, what are these expectations about the course? Well, most of them, they don't have big expectations. They feel, I don't know, I like to make some numbers, calculus. And some of them said that their expectation is to learn how things work, to go to a job interview, and said, I know how things work, I can start working right now. But just few of them, they say they want to change the world. I think we need more students that should think like that I'm doing engineering or I'm doing this course because I want to use this knowledge for the betterment of the world. Not to understand how things work now, but understand how the world should be and how we can radically transform things, process, and industries to achieve a better world. So the idea is students' empowerment. This must be the role of the professors. These are some empowerment quotations from IEEE. IEEE, the Institute of Electrical Engineering, Electrical and Electronic Engineering, is the biggest of the world in the engineering area. It's very interesting. We show this to the students. We say, scientists study the world as it is. Engineers create the world that has never been. So engineers can create a new energy system, for example, that works in harmony with nature. As engineers, we are going to be in a position to change the world, not just study it. A lot of students, they are our youth, that they don't realize that they can change the world, that the youth can move the world. But most of the time, they think they just have to learn how things work. This is the point that we need to change through education. Engineering is the application of science for human benefit. This is very beautiful. These are quotations from engineering, famous engineering. We are continually faced by great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems. I think this is the better one. How can you have more energy, including especially for developing countries, and reduce the emission of greenhouse gases? This look like an insoluble problem, but I think there is a great opportunity here to innovate and make this work. So let's go to another important point. Engineering students already study hard science. They have the knowledge to solve the problem. We know how photovoltaic solar energy works, how wind energy works, but why is the world still increasing the amount of fossil fuels? This is a point to see. The engineering must develop some skills and attitudes. So this is from the Washington Accord. They have more than 25 years, more than 30 years ago. So what engineering undergraduate students should know, demonstrate, and the attitudes they should possess? The first one is the most common one, and the most emphasized one is engineering knowledge. They must learn mathematics, natural science, engineering fundamentals, and specialization. And I think almost all universities and colleges in the world, they have this as the focus. But what the engineering students should learn to or should develop during the course? How to identify a problem, to really see climate change, if this is a problem. They need to be trained to identify real problems. Design solutions with appropriate considerations for public health, safety, cultural, society, and environment considerations. Must understand the engineering and society, assess societal health, safety, legal, cultural issues, and the consequent responsibilities. What's the responsibilities, the consequent responsibilities if you are still increasing the emissions of greenhouse gases? This is something that must be studied in the engineering course. Environment and sustainability. Understand and evaluate the sustainability and impact of professional engineering work in the solutions of the problems in societal and environment context. And ethics. This is the whole engineering students. But I really think we emphasize a lot engineering knowledge, and all the other topics, they must be improved through education. And we can use climate change to promote this reflection in the students to try to develop these skills, these soft skills. So here's the main point. I think motivation to solve world problems is the key. How you motivate students? You have to motivate them to solve world problems. I like these two quotes. The first one is from Abdul Baha, from Baha'i Education book. Teach them to dedicate their lives to matters of great importance and inspire them to undertake studies that will benefit mankind. I think this is the role of a professor. They have to teach the students to dedicate their lives to solve great mankind problems. It is not just to teach physics or mathematics, but it's to inspire the students to make great contributions to the world. The second one is a Baha'u'llah quote: be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age we live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. So today we have several challenges, and we need to center our education to solve these problems, like climate change problem, and not our generic education that are the same of the past decades. So what are the big problems, the great problems, the challenges? It's defined in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. About motivation to solve world problems is the key. This is a publication from United Nations produced in conjunction with international engineering groups. They say this point that it's important to emphasize the relevance and problem-solving approach into engineering. Engineering must focus on global issues such as poverty reduction, sustainable development, and climate change, and greener engineering and lower carbon technology. For example, we don't have class about poverty reduction, but this report says, and I agree, well, we need to talk to the students about poverty reduction and what can they do with engineering knowledge. It's important to show that engineering, innovation, and technology are part of the solution to global issues, to get the attention of young people and interested are raised to be attracted to engineering. Most people, we see engineering as a hard course, but if they see that they can deal with great problems, maybe they will be attracted to course it. This is another report from United Nations the important contribution that engineering makes to society is not sufficiently emphasized for or promoted efficiently. So we have high failure dropout rates. So it's related to motivation again. And course design should be arranged to be interesting and to enhance motivation. So the biggest motivation is this: we can teach the student, build capacity in the students, empower the students to solve big problems. For example, these are information about Sustainable Development Goals report. The world is not on track to end poverty. So if we show it to the students, I want you to use your knowledge, engineering knowledge, to help solve this. Can you solve this? I think the student will be motivated to solve it. We are all human. We all have a soul, we all have a heart. And I think we all, when we see there's a lot of poverty in the world, we want to do something. And if you say to the students, you can do something, you are learning to use your knowledge to do something to solve it. I think this will be the biggest motivation to them. For example, you have millions of people living in hunger. Can you solve this? More than half of the schools in sub-Saharan Africa do not have access to basic drinking waters, hand washing facilities. For example, it's very easy for every engineering student to make a project with a water pumping project and to have water to whatever they need. It's not technical hard to do it, but are the students aware about these problems? So they can make projects to solve it. You have a lot of people without basic drinking waters. It's not hard to solve this. You have millions of people without electricity. You can use renewable energy, for example, to solve it. These agreements, they give new guidelines. We need a drastic modification. And so to have this drastic modification on education, we need new guidelines. So these guidelines, I think it's very important. Parts recognize the importance of integrated, holistic, and balanced non-market approaches. In engineering, we usually study market approach. We have several solutions, and we see which one is cheaper. This is a market approach. So we need to think in another way, in a holistic, integrated, balanced, non-market approach. And again, sustainable development and poverty eradication. And Paris Agreement talk to us, and they say that it's important to have capacity building. That's about this lecture. That's why we're talking in this lecture, how we can generate this capacity building in professors and students. Again, in Paris Agreement, your solutions must consider human rights, the right of health, the rights of indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people in vulnerable situations, and the rights to development, as well as gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. This must be studied in engineering course and in all courses of the world, not just engineering. So the student will be empowered to get a better solution. That's the solution that we have today. This is the Brazilian guidelines for engineering curriculum. I think it's very beautiful, these guidelines. The engineering students should finish the course with the following characteristics: develop holistic and humanistic vision, be critic, reflexive, creative, cooperative, and ethical, with a strong technical knowledge. Be able to research, develop, adapt, and use new technologies in an innovative way. Be able to identify the need of the user, formulate, analyze, and solve in a creative way engineering problems. Use multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary perspectives. Consider global political, economic, social, environment, cultural, and safety aspects, and be committed to social responsibility and sustainable development. It's very hard to build this capacity in the students, but I think climate change is a subject that can help develop these skills, these soft skills in the students, because it's a global problem, it's a political problem, it's economical problem, social problem, environmental problem. You need to identify the needs of the user. They are multidisciplinary, they are transdisciplinary, they are related to social responsibility, they are related to sustainable development. So if the students learn about climate change, I think it's a way to develop the soft skills. For example, I give class of the basics of electricity. I can ask to the students how an electric motor works. But instead of it, I will ask them, how can you pump water to a rural community? We have a lot of people without drinking water. So they will need to study how an electric motor works to put this electric motor to pump water. And then I can put an additional question. How can you do it using renewable energy? So the student can make a research about photovoltaic solar energy, for example, and then develop a project. I think he will be more motivated to study how an electric motor works if they see a problem and see that this information can help him solve this problem. For example, calculate the electric current to feed a load. It's the generic question, it's the exam question. But we need to change it. Calculate the electric current to feed a sewer treatment plant. And then we can put another question. Calculate the amount of energy that can be recovered from the sewer. Is it possible to have a self-energized sewer treatment plant? This is innovative questions or solutions, creative solutions that we need to empower the students to think about it, not just to use fossil fuel for the treatment. Can we reuse this biogas to self-energize the treatment plant? Another example, calculate the electricity current to feed the motor of an electrical vehicle. If the energy, the electric energy from the vehicle comes from coal, it will not be renewable. So we can ask them another thing, design a photovoltaic station to feed the electric vehicle with renewable energy. So the student will see the problem and project a solution to it. We need to show the big picture to the students. So they will be motivated to study, and this will bring us to student-centered learning. This is a very important topic, and professors, they struggle. How can motivate the students to have a student-centered learning? I think this climate change is a very good motivation to do. I would like to show some field results. I give class in the last year to 100 engineering undergraduate students from electrical, mechanical, environment, civil, and chemical course at University of Brasilia, Brazil. There was basics of electricity and energy planning. And then at the end of the course, they respond a questionnaire with closed-ended and open-ended questions. The projects the projects must be related to sustainable development goals. So instead of just calculating electric currents and electric voltage and electrical power, they develop projects. They choose these projects because they think it's important. Rainwater use for rural areas, water supply for farms. This third one, I think it's very interesting. Water supply for public showers to people who live in the street. Water supply for firefighting at forest. Energy generation from urban waste. Construction waste recycling. Sewer treatment. This is another, I think it's very interesting, drones to deliver medicines in rural areas and electric mass transportation. So the students, they develop projects related to environment, economic disparity, and poverty. They try to reduce this economic disparity. And I think they like it. This is the result of the energy planning project course. We have this presentation, these pictures in Portuguese. It's the result of the course. They need to develop an electricity matrix for Brazil to 2050. Brazil is a developing country, so they will need 3 times more energy than we need now, because they're growing in the next years. So all the students, they receive the challenge to have more energy and less emissions. And then they solve it. We can see there is a lot of wind energy, there is a lot of photovoltaic energy. Some of them put biomass energy, hydroelectric energy. It's interesting that this is the most common energy sources we can see today. But there is tidal energy, heliothermic, solar heliothermic energy, and waste, urban waste energy. We can see, for example, this tidal energy, heliothermic energy, and waste energy. Just a few groups thought about using it. So they are not yet so creative, so innovative. But I think it's an important step to start showing that you can have a lot of renewable energy, you can have the solution, and this is a technical solution that each group of students proposed and show numbers that show that it can work for Brazil. The result of the questionnaire, I would like to show some small information. I asked them, do you size the opportunity at the maximum level during the elaboration of the project to solve big, real problems, to develop holistic and humanistic vision, be critic, reflexive, creative, cooperative, and ethical? We can see 99% of them agree. Something just agree, something strongly agree, but they like it to this methodology, this approach to solve big problems. I asked them, do you size these opportunities to consider global, political, economical, social, environment, cultural, and safety aspects? You can see 98% of them said, yes, I agree, it was good. And the last one, did you size the opportunity to be committed to social responsibilities and sustainable development? We can see again, 97% of them agree, but this is very good. In the open and questionnaire, most students said they had a new point of view of engineering and society with this approach. They said it was very good for their formation. Yeah. So, what I think we must do, professors need to change their teaching methods, deepening human and social issues in engineering courses, to train the new professionals with a broader and more comprehensive view about energy than before. The future professionals must be qualified now to deal with the complex subjects, discussing in their undergraduate course the following questions. What's the relationship between energy and environment, energy and social justice, energy and public health, energy and human rights, energy and poverty education, poverty eradication, energy and world citizenship, energy and world peace? We really don't study it at university, but I think we must to have this great drastic modification in the emissions. Make students reflect on the global implications of energy issues. Students should draw inspiration from the words of Baha'u'llah that the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. and let your vision be world-embracing rather than confining to your own self. By considering energy solutions that promote social justice and conduct humanity toward world peace. I think this is a good way to try to have a global vision of the problem. And climate change is a global problem. For example, in this chart, we have the emissions of the countries that has more emissions in the world. From the left is the emissions, and on the right is the per capita emissions. For example, if you have countries that don't pollute so much, they have few emissions, most of them can think, oh, my emissions are very low, so I can use more coal, I can use more gas, because I'm emitting just a few. And China, United States, they need to reduce, but I can pollute more because I pollute just a few. But if you have this point of view, this local point of view, will not reduce the emissions. Everyone who already has few emissions will have more emissions. It doesn't make sense, but I heard it a lot of time about it. It's a local vision of the problem. So climate change will be a challenge to try to build capacity to empower the students to have a global view of the problem. So I think this is the last one. What's the new paradigm for the energy sector? We need to change from an energy sector focused on technology to be focused on the human being. They need, the current paradigm, they seeks to generate energy for economic growth. We need to seek economic growth consuming less energy with more efficiency. We have nowadays a national view of the problem. We need a world view of the problem. The current paradigm is based on economic justice. We need to be based on social justice. We need to move from an economic vision that considers mainly the direct cost of power generation to economic vision that considers direct and indirect environment and social costs. We need to consider the expenditures of adaptation and mitigation. Generating energy is not an end in itself. It's a promotion of the development of humanity. So if it's hurting the humanity with a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, we need to change it and move from traditional forms of power generation to renewable energy sources. Additional information, there are two papers about these topics in the International Forum site. I kindly invite you to read about it. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shayani. We now open for questions, comments, all the above. Raise your hand or type something in the chat. I have a question, which is a lot of times scientists and engineers don't see their role as educating the public. So we end up with political interests, putting out lobbying campaigns and kind of changing public opinion on fundamental scientific and engineering issues. Like one of these, your slides had a lot of, one of the ways to generate energy that doesn't consume fossil fuels is to burn garbage. And I know this is popular in other parts of the world. And for example, in America, there's been a very successful campaign by, I don't know which interests, to make the public fear this technology. It's very clean. And somehow Americans are afraid of it, and we keep voting down and successfully keeping this kind of technology from being deployed in America. Do you see it as like scientists and engineers' role specifically to educate the public? And is there anything we could do in our curriculums to encourage or create that capacity within our students?
We need to teach the students about critical thinking. They need to be able to analyze if the information is real, or it's good, or it's not good. But in the engineering course, in the first 2 years, we have a lot of calculus and physics. In calculus, it's mathematics, you have just one right answer to a question. So you have equation, and this equation have just one right answer. It's mathematics, it's okay. But a lot of students think that there is only one solution for the problem, because they learn that there is only one right answer in mathematics. And then when they go to physics, physics is very important for engineering. But when we learn physical laws, it's a Faraday laws, or a lot of equations, the physical laws, they works forever. They have ever existed, and they will ever exist. It's a law of physics. So the students, they receive the message that what's happening now always happened and will always happen too. And there is only one solution for the problems. That is today's solutions. So most of them, they came with no creative new ideas. They want to learn how things works, because this must be the only solution, and this is the everlasting solutions. This is a big problem. So we need to teach the students how to make a critical thinking about it, and let them decide if firing residues is good or is bad. He can make the calculations to see if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think the students must be empowered to take their own decisions about what's good technology, what's not good technology.
Thank you. You showed us in some of your slides how the engineering associations themselves called for this broader view of education and addressing social problems and so on and so forth. How do you educate the professors of engineering? They seem to be the problem if they're stuck with old ways of teaching when even their profession at the international level is calling for them to take these new approaches. You've done a beautiful example yourself of how it should work, but how do you get your colleagues in the engineering profession to change their teaching methods and to open up to this need and to pass it on to their students?
As university professors, we don't have classes for us, or what's the best way to teach the students. We need to have a master's degree and PhD in engineering, for example. So my colleagues and me, we don't have education classes. We have engineering classes. So it's hard to deal with new paradigms, because we don't study about what's the best way to teach, what's the best way. We don't study about education. So it's hard to change it. I think that the best way is to try to make this with the students, and the students, they will talk to other students and to the group of students and to other professors that they like this approach, and ask them to modify their approach. I think this is one way to do it. We will have a Congress of engineering education. But what I saw is that in this Congress, they talk a lot about flipped classroom, project-based learning, and student-centered methods. But I don't think they talk a lot about motivation. They talk a lot about techniques. How can you get the attention, the focus of the students? But I think the real motivation is based on the betterment of the world. I think this must be taught to everybody.
Is this something where the employers, the universities, could take more of a lead in asking professors to update their knowledge and broaden their approach? Perhaps there's some leverage that needs to be at the level of the administration of universities, who are in fact the employers of the professors. Because something has to be done to speed up the process. We have to wait until your students become professors in 20 or 30 years before we see the change.
Yes, we have these guidelines. So this new Brazilian guidelines, it's very nice. And we need to adapt our courses to promote the soft skills. But each professor, they have, he's free to teach the way they think it's the best. So it's, I think showing examples that a different approach works, it's a good way to invite them to adopt this approach.
Go for it, Mark.
Hi, Rafael. Thank you for your presentation. The list that you put up for the students of their suggested projects, I noticed intuitively it had a systems thinking approach. Historically or traditionally, engineering would be focused on one little thing without regard to the surrounding area. I'm an engineer. I went to school a long time ago. And the list back then might have been something like, how do you reduce the unit cost of a consumer item to maximize profit to owners and investors? Or how can you change a patent so that you can have your own? These are how to build a big car that goes fast, how to build a dam without regard to the environment or the people it displaces, and how do you build a seawall from concrete instead of using the environment, for example, growing mangroves instead of having this big dam. Systems thinking seems to be intuitive in the list that you put up there. This is more of a comment than a question, but I guess the question is, if to use a metaphor, if I'm in an airplane and the plane is landing, I want the pilot to focus on landing the plane, not on how much CO2 he's putting into the air. So in a cooperative and a collaborative arrangement, community development type of thing, we need people to know how to think in systems, to have a bigger purview, and to work together. But when it's time for them to work as an engineer, we need to know them how to work as an engineer.
I think it's important this system thinking to try to find the best solution overall. For example, about the airplane you said. When we talk about generation electricity with wind energy for emergency problems, if the airplane has some problem, electricity problem, they can generate energy with a wind turbine. And at this moment, you don't think about efficiency. You want the energy to everyone get alive and not what's the most efficient thing. Solution. But in this system problem, we need to consider economic, social, and environment problems, factors. Economic factors, we know how to calculate them, and we have equations to solve it. We can use derivative equations to find what is the lower value, economic value. But engineers, they mostly don't know how to evaluate social problems or social solutions and environment solutions to mix it with cost solutions. I think this is the big picture they need to see and try to consider it in the equation. I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Gary wants to ask something.
I do. I raised my hand.
Okay, Barbara, we'll do you after Gary.
I have to run to another meeting, but I don't have a very difficult question, but I just want to, what I was thinking when I heard you talking was that, when in the world that we live in, we know that the energy use has increased to such a point, and the way that we produce this energy is causing us huge problems and leading us to difficulties in the future, in the near future even. And so the question I started thinking, well, what about if we worked backwards, if we calculated backwards? Do we really need all this energy? Or is there other ways in which we can utilize, we can create energy in such a way that we don't overexceed the capacity of the planet today, the ecological footprint, and overshoot, for example, the issues that could lead to other problems such as climate change or whatever. And so it's just, I think just thinking that for example, you can read at places that the solar energy is said to be sufficient to cover all the energy needs of the planet if we just captured it, and if we just had the mechanisms by which we could use it. And so that sounds okay to me. We're not going anywhere bad if we use all this solar energy just like that. And so that sounds reasonable to me. But when we say, let's create with the students new mechanisms for energy, well, that's perfect and it's correct, but does it really finish the story? That's my question. Can we keep within the limits of the planet and the requirements?
About this, your comments are very interesting. I usually ask about the students what they think about flying cars. They all of them like flying cars. I think it's very technological, and for engineering, it's an interesting challenge. How you project and develop a flying car. But then I ask them, does we really need a flying car? You need more energy to fly a car than to have a car on the floor. So does we need solutions that use more energy, or we need solutions that use less energy? And then we try to make the students think about it. And then their reflections go to mass transportation, electric buses, electric subway. But it's not the first solution that they find. The first solution is flying cars. But we need to show this problem. I want to do the same thing, move people from one place to other place using less energy. This is the challenge that we need to show the students and stimulate them to develop a solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go, Barbara, yeah.
Okay, it's okay for me to speak. Recently, because I'm homebound, I got online and I took a free course from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, online. Now, it was at least a decade old, but the title of the class was The Economics of Energy. And it was a good, thorough course. I had never realized how complicated the issue is. And I am so glad that, Rafael, that you are encouraging your students to think about this. But the thing that we also need to be aware, somebody graduates, they want a job. A lot of times doing innovation requires government or large corporation sponsorship. And what I discovered taking that course is that, these big corporations, these oil companies, whatever, have much more powerful people advocating to the public for the energy, which is why that you found, Nelia, that the burning of rubbish has not taken hold in the United States. It's not because it's not a good idea. It's because there are people who are being paid to convince us not to do that. And therefore, you don't get public support. If you understand, we are in a crisis of misinformation. And I don't think I have to explain that to any of you, but truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. And so I think that change is going to come, and I'm so glad to hear what Rafael is saying. The change is going to become because younger people know better ideas, and they just start pushing for better ideas. They are out there, but there are unfortunately people who have agendas for earning money that are not necessarily good for the well-being of humankind. And that's what we have to stay focused on, making sure that our population knows where the better ideas are. And I'm so glad this organization is there, because I think that's something that you are capable of doing.
Well, thanks for your comments. I think nowadays there will be money to implement climate solutions from Paris Agreement, or from even politicals, because a lot of countries in these days decide to have net zero emissions from energy sector. This is really hard to get. But the thing I say to the students is do not worry about the cost of your solution right now. If you have a good solution, the governments, the politicians, or the climate change agreements, they will send money to make it work. So the politicians to make environment propositions, they need technical propositions that show it's possible to do. And I think engineering must show innovative technical solutions and have the collaboration of the governments to implement it as a government plan or a world plan for environment. Okay.
We can hope so. Texas has been going through a big learning crisis right now, that
Yes.
oil is not going to solve everything.
Our next comment comes from Lorena, who is studying production engineering at Dr. Shayani's University, the University of Brasilia. She says, we have been trying for a few semesters now to develop projects based on problems brought by external from the university, external requests in terms of sustainability. From what I have experienced, most difficulties rely on the lack of connection between the major themes. And students, because we have not been instructed on seeing results as dynamic systems, but rather focused on specific calculations. Mm-hmm. How do you think we can recruit members of society to request more from universities in our university programs in its application to see things as dynamic systems?
Each professor, they are free to give the classes the way they think it's the better for the students. These new guidelines from Brazilian Ministry of Education, they requires adaptation of the curriculums. And then in these adaptations, the Faculty of Technology, they are working on it. And I think they will have the collaboration of the students, of the academic center of the students. I think this will be the forum where the students should ask for curriculum adaptation, modifications, not adaptation, it's big modifications to have these integrated disciplinaries. For example, there is a very beautiful example in the world. It's the Olin College in the United States. They don't have different subjects. So they have projects. They study projects to the betterment of the world. It's a very beautiful proposition. And then they learn the things they need to do these projects in an integrated way. And I think all the curriculums, engineering curriculums, must migrate to something like this. Thanks for your comments.
We have a comment from Yovanka who says, your talk is on a very important topic. And you mentioned several aspects that are essential to really change the education of engineers, not just in Brazil, but around the world. From my point of view, humanistic education is the most important aspect in this change process. Not exactly a question, but a nice comment. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very important.
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Shayani? I am wondering if there is a coordinated effort from academia, I'm sure it's different in every country and there's so many academics around the world, but is there a coordinated effort from academia to advise governments on issues related to your field that they would need to know to change policies? Like, hey, we should be subsidizing such and such kind of energy generation, or we should be taxing some other kind, or any kind of ideas like this that experts in your field know needs to happen, but politicians aren't taking action on?
There are a lot of organizations that work on it. For example, we have the Brazilian Engineering Education Society. They help the government to write these guidelines. So I think the societies, they gather engineering related to education and make these propositions to the government. But I think engineering it's a classic course. It's a conventional course. So it's hard to make big changes. For example, the government of Brazil decided that every course must have extension activities. So the students from all courses, including engineering, they must go outside the university. They need to have contact with the society, learn the problems with society, and then come back to university to try to solve this problem. It's really hard to make this happen in the engineering course. We are all used to have classes inside the classroom and with the professor speaking all the time. So when you say the students should go out and learn something outside the classroom, it's hard to implement it. I think it's very important and we must do it. But we have these new guidelines. I think it's correct guidelines, but I think it's hard to put it work for all the professors, because most of us, we teach the way we learn it. And several decades ago, we learned it into a classroom. So most of them think that learning inside a classroom is the right way to do it.
How does one go, not one, but a whole group of people go about changing the IEEE requirements for a given engineering degree? Do a group of professors like lobby the IEEE, or how would you convince them to add something like climate change to their curriculum?
I am IEEE member for several years. I really like IEEE because I think it's the only technical forum that I saw that talks about ethics with their members and with the students. So I think it's very beautiful that their motto is developing technology for developing mankind or developing humanity. I think they want the best for the world. So that's why I really like IEEE. But most of people like the technical point of view of IEEE. We have the most updated research new words available, but the research are, for example, if I have a lot of solar energy, this is my field of expertise. If you have a lot of solar energy, during the day, you have plenty of energy, and then you will overload the electric grid distribution system. So we need to have a solution about it. And a lot of people, they work that you must use just a few solar energy because the electric grids will not support, will not host a lot of solar energy. I think this technical point of view is wrong. I think we need to modify the electric grid to have a lot of solar energy. But most of them, they think that we need to keep the equipment safe and reduce renewable energy, for example. And this is a lot of there are a lot of papers about it, and people like IEEE because they publish good papers about all technical fields. But I think we need more papers about social science and engineering to complete these technical papers.
Thank you, Dr. Shayani. I would have benefited tremendously if I had more practical work in my chemistry curriculum when I was studying as an undergrad. We learned all about the molecules and not about the systems, just like you're saying. I love how you're taking real world examples and integrating them in your courses, you know, doing what you can do independent of the trends of the wider world. And it's wonderful to hear that you love IEEE and think they're a great organization. It's very rare that you get like great compliments to such a any large organization, right? Especially one that rules our entire undergraduate curriculums for a large section of our degrees in the world here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rafael. It was a beautiful presentation and very inspiring, I think, for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'd like to thank the participants of all of you, and the opportunity to come here in the EF forum to share these thoughts about education for sustainability. Thank you.